Well, good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the second Infrastructure Masons webinar, live webinar. And we're delighted to be joining you here from the beautiful Hotel Halekulani in Honolulu at the PTC 2019 conference. And it's my great pleasure to welcome three guests who are going to join us this afternoon to discuss some of the challenges of delivering great resources and great performance in the Asia-Pacific Rim. And I'd like to welcome on my right, Chris Street from STT Global Data Centers. On his right, Jack Pouchet from Vertiv. And on his right, on the far side, left hand as you're looking, Simon Cooper, who's the Chief Operating Officer of NextDC. Gentlemen, very good to see you all, and welcome. Thank you for coming along on this lovely afternoon here in Hawaii. So we're going to be talking about a number of different areas, and I'd like to be able to sort of zoom in and ask each of the guys to comment initially on a number of questions that I've prepared on that subject area. What we'd then like to be able to do is open this up so that you can use the Q&A function that you'll find on the webinar. And we'll pick a number of questions after maybe 35, 40 minutes of initial questions that we can go live and listen to your questions and do our best to try and answer them between us. So what I'd like to do perhaps is ask each of the chaps to introduce themselves first, say a little bit about what their business and their role involvement is, particularly in respect of the data center and digital infrastructure world here in Asia Pacific. And then we'll pick up from there and move into the resourcing area. So, Chris, could I come to you first, perhaps? Tell us a little bit about you, what your current role is, and the bigger picture, and we'll come back to the specifics on resourcing a bit later.
Okay, great. So, Chris Street, I'm the Group Chief Marketing Officer for ST Telemedia Global Data Centers. We are a co-location operator based and headquartered in Singapore, with operations in Singapore, India, China, and London, UK. And so we run approximately a little over 70 sites globally, about 700 megawatts in the total portfolio from a colo site. And yeah.
And how long have you been there, Chris?
Been there a little over 3 years now.
Marvelous. Living in Singapore?
Living in Singapore for a little over 6. Gotcha. So about 20 years in the data center business through both on the end user side and also on the operator side.
Excellent. Well, look, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Jack, to you.
Oh, thank you. So Jack Pouchet, Vice President of Business Development for Vertiv. We're a supplier of mission critical infrastructure to data center operators around the globe. Today I'm wearing a different hat. A lot of people don't realize that as a $4 billion company, we have data centers. We have several data centers. We also use cloud services. We also deliver certain products and services via software as a service through cloud services. So I'm going to be wearing that hat today as we talk about some of the issues in delivering.
Okay, and you're based on the other side of the Pacific in Orange County, I think.
Yes, I'm based in Orange County, California, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks very much for joining us on this one. And Simon, perhaps the same from you. Please.
Yeah, great. So first of all, thank you very much for the invite. I really appreciate it. I'm Simon Cooper, Chief Operating Officer at NextDC, so I'm responsible for the design, build, and operate of our now 8 data centers in Australia. And we're looking to expand across Asia, which made this even more pertinent for me. We've been running since 2011, which is when I joined the company. And we've grown from a small single data center in Brisbane to 8 across Australia, approximately 50 megawatts under management and 150 megawatts of potential deployment at this point. So we just see the market expand rapidly, and that's just in Australia. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
And you're Sydney-based, yeah?
No, I'm in Brisbane.
Oh, Brisbane, sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much for coming on this. I think we've got some great coverage there. And to complete the picture, aside from my role with Infrastructure Masons, I'm Chief Executive of a company called Chiora. I live in Hong Kong, and we focus on the China market. So between us, I hope, chaps, we can get some good perspective on here. So maybe I can come first, and I'll mix it up who goes first, because come to you, Simon, on this one. 30-second warning on that. You mentioned a moment ago about the market and the opportunities that you see in the region. We know from all of the data that we see out there that the data about the data in Asia Pacific that it's going one way and it's going north fast. Tell us your perspective on that, and how is that going to influence NextDC's progress and plans in the region? Because we've got so much opportunity.
Yep. I think fundamentally the choice is, where do you want to grow? You can grow almost anywhere. whether it's in the small markets where there will be initial deployments required and edge compute and so on, or do you want to carry on supporting the large scale cloud deployments and so on. At the moment, our focus has been on supporting those, and we've supported them in Sydney and Melbourne, and we believe even markets that Chris mentioned in Singapore, super competitive, well supplied, but is going to grow a lot. Same in Hong Kong, same in Japan, and for us, getting our feet wet, if you like, across Asia in markets that we can understand initially is our current strategy. So we can take our learnings and our maturity and our skill base from Australia and help build across Asia in a structured fashion.
Gotcha. And do you see something significant around the, if you like, this data sovereignty piece in terms of directions that some of the smaller markets might be going in?
Yeah, it's a great question, and was something that was a big discussion point early in NextDC's life, and was even a discussion point at the state level within Australia. Right. So I hear it less and less now, and I think a lot of the underlying paperwork, let's say, has been resolved in terms of if you want to deploy your data in certain places, you can. You need to be just serious about how you put that paper trail in place. Singapore continues to serve a huge part of Southeast Asia, and I think that will change, but it's not going to change quickly. Yeah. And the bottom line for us is the demand is going to grow everywhere. We're really only at the bottom of the curve in terms of large-scale deployments beyond those major cities, and so it's just a matter of making sure you choose where you want to focus and stay focused on succeeding there before you move on.
Gotcha. Can you jump to this then, Chris? Just to throw you on that one. What about your perspective from the Singapore side? And of course, with STT Global Data Centers, you're focused on much wider markets than, of course, Singapore, in India, for example, and other locations.
And so what we've seen is definitely to, very same as Simon said, is a broad-based growth, and it's across different customer segments. It's across the different metros. And it's just a drive, and that the digital transformation at enterprises is doing it, and whether it's in an enterprise segment, whether it's in the cloud operators themselves, whether it's into the public sector, everybody seems to be growing. Everybody's requiring more data centers, and that's in that near term, 3 to 5 years, we don't see any slowdown of that. And within each of the metros or the markets themselves, India, Singapore, you see the growth, and it's being driven not only in those large hub markets, but also more spread out across into more the smaller markets as they are today, more emerging.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I see in the China market, which I think is reflected in particularly the big markets like India, there's a compound effect of both growth in the number of users and the intensity with which those users use the various forms of social media and the internet and in the widest sense of expanding into IoT, smart cities and so on. And in China, of course, the take-up is huge, reflecting so much of Asia Pacific, because I think I can remember only a little while ago where Western Europe, North America were the big chart bars, and then Asia Pac was on the right-hand side as a very small option. It's come on significantly from there. Jack, what your view from the Vertiv side? Because of course Vertiv's focus both on its internal requirements but also externally. What extent are you now focused on Asia Pac as part of the global strategy?
So when we're looking at the Asia Pac marketplace, so some of the things we're seeing, and everyone's touched upon it, is the growth of the massive data centers. So, for example, your project in Tianjin, the 100 to maybe 500 megawatt campuses, the very large scale facilities, and we're keenly focused on that space where we're seeing throughout the Asia Pac region some Sydney example, Singapore, for example, markets where you're just seeing this explosion, and we're going to need more large data centers. But then to feed that, because as you mentioned, the volume of users and the volume and veracity of the data that's being developed is not just limited to these core markets. It's going all over. So when we talk about edge could be everything from, say, a single rack deployment, but more realistically, it's anywhere in the 1 meg to say 4 or 5 meg footprint. And we're going to see just a plethora of those going throughout the region in order for everybody to be connected and everybody to be able to see the growth they're looking for.
Okay, so we see great opportunity. We're all in exciting businesses with great growth prospects around there. One of the features that we'd identified for the discussion this afternoon was about resources, because it's all very well building significant new platforms, leading edge technologies, and as Jack, you were just saying, pushing from the hyperscale data centers into the edge and all points in between, frankly. We're going to need some great people to do that. And what's a feature I've seen in many markets, North America, Western Europe, but particularly Asia, is where are we going to find the strategic leadership? Where are we going to find the professional and technical managers? And, if you like, the apprenticed engineers that are going to enable us to operate in this environment. Firstly, is that a matter of concern at your board discussions and at your strategic planning level?
Yeah, happy to start. It is it is a concern. A concern is probably the wrong word. It is an issue, and I think to a certain extent, NextDC's DNA is kind of blessed with having to deal with that from the beginning. Because as I always talk, at the end of the day, and Jack knows this, we work with Vertiv on a few projects, and we're at the end of the supply chain. So, whether it's equipment being manufactured in North America or in Europe or even in Asia, it's still 10 hours by plane or a week and a half by a ship if it goes the right way. So we've had to deal with that right from the outset. And one of the things I would say, from our perspective that we've worked very hard on, when I started, we had essentially 0 operational staff. In fact, I walked in the door and asked to meet the facility manager of our first facility that opened a few days beforehand. And they said, "Oh, we don't have one." I was like, "Okay, list number 1." And since then, we've got 60 technical operational staff and another 60 or 70 sort of front of house staff. And we're very focused on bringing sort of young people who are interested in the industry or interested in technology and grooming them through and finding out if they want to carry on, whether it be deeper into operations or on the engineering side where we can sponsor degrees and so on. So there's some of that. And certainly as we look at other markets, there's no shortage of people. And it's hard to expect that you can just land and find a whole bunch of technical excellence. So that'll be one of the things that we will be doing, and we'll also be speaking with local government and local universities and saying, one of the reasons we're kind of talking to you early is because we want to build that pipeline of people.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And Jack, what about you? I mean, Vertiv's got many thousands of employees around the world, but are they the right people in the right place and at the right time now?
Well, so that's interesting. So roughly 19,000 people around the globe. Our CEO, Rob Johnson, he's spoken publicly, he's written blog articles about the human factor, right, for the data centers, whether it's our own data centers and what we're doing within our facilities and as we're growing our footprint, or whether it's our partners and trying to help them get ready for this wave. We collectively, as an industry, need to work on that. That's one of the reasons why Vertiv is a founding member of the Infrastructure Masons. That's why we're out talking about it. We're working with government leaders around the globe. I've spoken about this before. We don't have the infinite supply, but one area that we've tapped, and many of you have as well, is looking at military men and women coming out with some of the training that they get in the military. But that's not sufficient to address the growth that we're seeing. So we need to work with academics, we need to work with local communities, as well as we need to look at the architecture and design of the facilities themselves. And what tools can we put in place to perhaps make them maybe not self-healing, but a little more intelligent, so that way we can roll the right resources there, perhaps using VR and AR, so that way we can have a skilled person, but an SME expert behind them that can give them that deeper knowledge.
Okay. You've picked up some points I'd like to come back to in there in a minute. Chris, complete the picture for us with the STT perspective.
Well, we've worked with local governments, worked with academia to kind of do that, do structured internships. We've taken an approach from an organizational perspective to get kind of broad-based throughout the organization, not only the technical skills, but also on the business side to get them to understand what data centers really are. So even our accountants, are expected to pick up some basic level training, industry, both external and then internal programs, just so they have that flavor of data center. Because we were very similar to Simon. It's like, we started the business 4 years ago, and you know, it was from scratch. It was 2 buildings coming out of the ground. They were dirt when I joined. So it was you know, really starting the team from just the core group, and then really bringing people up. And so we've done that. It is hard to find, but we've also, as Jack mentioned, looked to adjacent industries. Yes. Military being one, and any mission critical. You know, it's Navy is throughout different points in my career, we've pulled from Navy, because if the generator fails on a ship, people know what to do, right? And and to keep it going. And so we've used those type of experiences to parlay into the mission critical data center space, and done that. And so I think there's an effort and a focus across all the different markets to do that, make sure there's a pipeline of good qualified candidates. And so far, you know, knock on wood, we've been very fortunate to be able to staff that. I haven't seen a shortage in any industry yet, or any of the markets that we operate. But it is, you know, there is that hesitation that we're some of the leadership is getting older. Not myself, but you know, some of us were getting older in our careers, and so there is looking for that next gen to kind of come up and take the realm.
Gotcha. Now, Jack, you mentioned, you touched on sort of you know, AI, if you like, in the wider sense, because the nirvana that we perhaps seek is that you know, we can be less dependent on you know, on people on the ground, but of course it can only go so far. But one of the things I know from the China perspective, but also my experience in other parts of Asia Pac, is that you know, the markets are wonderfully adaptive. And you know, spot what's good and improve on it. And often you see leapfrogs taking place. And I think that could be a feature that we might see here. Any comments from any of you on the, you know, how hard you're grappling with the AI and the machine learning to reduce resourcing, if you like, because there is a risk factor there. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, Chris.
I'll take the lead. So in some of our facilities, what we've been doing on the control side is doing much more kind of predictive. From the control systems, and being able to kind of help address some of the maintenance issues before, you know, just kind of the standard maintenance programs come in. We've done some use of robotics in our sites to help with remote hands. Yes. And you know, and we haven't gone yet with the AR or VR. We've looked at some. I think they're still early in terms of the application to what we do on a day-to-day basis, but I think there's some interesting. There's possibilities out there that I think are really intriguing, especially like AR. We looked at something that was more tailored for training of the engineering staff, as you go through there to help with simulations, right? And because you do the tabletop reviews of your ops and crisis management, and that's all well and good, but the closer that you get to the actual situation, which you'll never fully replicate, but closer you get to that, the better that the performance will be later when it actually happens, and it unfortunately probably will happen. It always does. So
that's a really interesting one, because I think I've in my past I've been involved in taking technical trainees in the military and the civilian aircraft maintenance sector, you know, which is, you know, the ultimate critical system to my mind, you know, through the virtual reality and augmented reality routes, because actually it's a brilliant way of creating labs in which you can work with mock-ups and take people through in a safe environment, you know, the changes that are there. No, I think that's a really good idea. Simon, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, the imperative is there anyway. So if you look at the mass cloud market, for instance, all of those users are constantly looking to reduce their cost base whilst massively increase their output. And so from our perspective, you know, the price of land does not go down. Last time I looked, the price of concrete doesn't go down. And so we've got to look for areas in which we can provide high quality service on a lower cost base. And so that aligns nicely with how do you do more. And I look at it more from how do you do more with not many more people? Because one of the things you've also got to retain within the company is a motivation. And if you end up going out there saying, you know, it's all going to be taken over by robots, it doesn't help, right? And also at the end of the day, what we find is the vast majority of our customers actually want to deal with a person. So whether it's automated ordering platforms, 50% only go to a certain point, and then they pick up the phone or want to come and visit.
Yeah.
So the human factor is always going to be really important. But whether it's deploying all over Southeast Asia, or whether it's a site that starts out with a couple of data halls and has got the potential to grow to 50 data halls, running that with the right number of people under the right circumstances and having the right experts there is really important. So there's a balance. We're doing stuff with machine learning, doing stuff with AI, we're doing stuff with vibration and heat that's constantly being learned into the machines and so on. So we're looking at all of these angles, some stuff with fiber sensing. So there's lots of opportunities out there. The trick from my perspective is to keep the lights on, obviously, make sure you've got that pipeline of people coming through who get the chance to touch the equipment. One of the things we learned very early on, and I'm sure you guys went through this, is if you don't actually let your people touch the equipment when it matters, they're too timid or they don't know what to do. So there's a lot that VR can do, but a lot of actual physical maintenance is helpful as well. So striking that balance is really important. And at the end of the day, the thing I say to all of my guys as we bring the AI and the information through is, at the end of the day, that team has to own that site. So the minute you start letting them think that you believe the machine more than them, then again you've got a motivational challenge. So these are all the things that you have to balance.
Absolutely. And Jack, what about from the Vertiv perspective? I mean, this the resourcing and the training and the availability. Do you want to amplify a little bit in terms of how are you using these type of tools to enhance performance of your guys?
Yeah, excellent. So amplifying on what they were discussing. So I'll leave the big facilities aside because we're always going to see people in the big facilities, whether they have support. And I think it will be a balance, as you said, of machine learning and AIs to help augment the team, but not to replace them. But when we look at edge deployments, again, whether it's a single rack in a high-rise building or multiple racks spread out, from our perspective, we need to add more skilled technicians to be able to go out and do, call it a truck roll, but to go out there and do proactive and preemptive service on this infrastructure before a lights out, or before an outage. I shouldn't say lights out, before an outage, right? So this is where the machine learning comes in. So having an ML based within the platform, and whether it's, again, whatever the size of that platform is, but having a machine learning system in there that can say, hey, the UPS or the cooling system or whatever it may be is starting to act a little funny. Now it's not out, and it may not be going out, but this is an abnormality. Phone home is, we call it the old ET phone home, right? So send that data packet back to an SME that could be in Shenzhen, they could be in Sydney, they could be wherever they are, and then they're able to go into a real-time, we call it the digital twin lab, and go into a real lab with real equipment and say, okay, I know what that is. That means the capacitors are, at 70%, and they really should be at 60%. So they're aging prematurely, but it's not a problem now. But guess what? We've got a PM coming up in the next 6 months. Let's just add that to the list. Yes, exactly. So we're looking to build those tools, but we still have to do the training because people have to go there, right? Someone's got to go, and so it's using the VR and the ARs, and then fortunately we have our own data centers, and we have our own labs spread throughout the world with equipment that we can put people in front of and let them work on. Like you said, if you don't let them touch it, then they'll never be any good at it. So we're doing that.
Good. So let me take it on a little bit. So thinking widely, perhaps outside your immediate home market, of course, when you're in other adjacent environments, are there any special factors that you've come across that perhaps are different challenges that you might find, or peculiar challenges in Asia Pacific in terms of the different markets or different things that you need to consider? Any thoughts on that in terms of, and of course that could be at one level from the level of government relationships through to linguistic capabilities and the like. Any thoughts on that?
Well, certainly from my perspective, we've got a whole brave new world out there, and when I spoke at the All-Staff Conference last July, I made the point that we're ambitious and we want to open and run some data centers in these markets, but it's not just about building more data centers. It's about transforming the company from a very Australian and very capable and professional organization into an international company. And that's not an easy thing to do, whether it's language, local culture, getting people to walk the line between, well, we've done this for 5 years now in these ways, but still being open to new ways of doing things that may be cheaper, faster, better, whatever it is, and genuinely transforming the organization so it as a whole thinks internationally and across Asia Pac. And I think, primarily from my perspective, if if you were to expand, let's say, from the UK across Europe, there's a reasonable amount of cultural alignment until you kind of get deep into the east. Whereas from our perspective in Australia, you very quickly come up against extremely different cultures in every single direction.
Yes,
and that's a fascinating challenge, and one that I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah. Chris, what about you? Because you touch a lot of different markets, of course.
Yeah, and it is, and so you have that challenge of building the cohesiveness at the group level to say that, hey, we're all under the STT GDC, and because we run we operate different brands, we've got different ownership structures. Some we got minority interest versus majority, and so, but we do have commonality, and it's really, at the end of the day, it all boils down to communication across and making sure that you've got alignment on the message and clarity on the message of the objectives of where you're driving, and consistency in that messaging across at all levels of the organization. So if you're open with kind of, here's where we want to take the organization and where we want to move it forward, and here's going to be your role at the individual level and at the team level, then you get people to rally around that. But there are unique, and there's challenges with that. I mean, you go into some of the markets and just logistics it's a very large market in Mumbai.
Right.
But a person that lives in Andheri is not going to be working in Navi Mumbai because of logistics and day-to-day to get from one side of the city to the next, unless they have to.
Yes.
And so they're going to be very focused on finding, employment in that, and be very leery to take a competing package across. And you get that in some of the cities in China, right? They just, from Singapore, not so much. London, not so much. But it becomes a concern, and it's very localized to that, and each market's different. We're just starting in Thailand, and we're discovering a whole new culture there in terms of how they approach it. But we're saying, here's kind of our global expertise, and we want to bring it up. But it's the new Thai mix, and so it's exciting though.
Oh, it certainly is. I think one of the things I'm often inspired by, we benefit and enjoy in Asia some extraordinary standards of customer service, for example, in the best hotels. And, the lessons we may be able to learn from where you take an operational playbook out of, for example, a Ritz-Carlton, and how they have dropped it onto the ground. You cycle through some of your international or regional leaders who start setting the template high. But you need to recruit locally. You have to bring in the local expertise. And now, in the hotel industry, the hospitality industry, it's way more established than, of course, in our industry. And I think how we benchmark and draw some lessons from those environments, I think, is particularly important. We had a session up in, you mentioned Tianjin a little earlier, where we are trying to take our operational teams down a journey which, for some of them, is a new experience of, good can mean a lot of things to different people. You've got to show good, and you've got to inspire good, and you've got to lead good. Excuse the grammar in that regard. But being able to have reference points, and we had a terrific presentation at the Ritz-Carlton in Tianjin from an inspirational leader, local leader, who had assimilated the cultural values, understood the processes, but then put the local context around it, and that, I think, is something we can probably learn from. And do you look to other industries to draw parallels? I mean, we talked about the military as an example, but any others that come to mind that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the hotel industry. We have a couple of individuals, and one who's progressed very strongly through the business, who exactly had that sort of front of house concierge training in one of the large hotel chains, and it was luck at that point. I think we were only probably 2 years old as a company, but a real light bulb moment came on. And so one of the parts of our onboarding and training is that there are several things important to our customers, and security is one of them. But security is not saying no. Security is understanding specifically what the individual should be doing, ought to be doing, wants to be doing, and then making it as easy and as straightforward for them as possible. And so overlaying that, exactly as you say, that I think that industry has probably taken it as far as anyone has. Bringing that in, coupled with we have people from the military who understand why methods of procedure are extremely important, why it's not embarrassing to have a subordinate stood next to you and point out that you just read that method of procedure statement wrong, and so you better not proceed, and that's a good thing. And all of these things mixed together. But as Chris says, it comes down to clarity of communication, both backwards and forwards and upwards and downwards, and and honesty. And if I look at some of the cultural challenges, so we have a set of values as most mature corporates do, and one of the things we're thinking about already is when you translate those into the local language, which is important, you've also got to translate them into the local dialect and understanding of what you're really trying to get across.
Right. Yes.
So you've got to join all these things up. But certainly other industries like the hotel industry, as you look at which part of your business is trying to achieve what, as you grow again and you look to try and leverage some of that centralized skills, then call center type applications become more and more important, so you can route to the right person as fast as possible. Again, what are the leading examples of that done well? Because I think we've all suffered from when it's not done well.
And there was a parallel drawn earlier with Europe, of course. And I resisted the temptation to mention Brexit when it talk about Europe, the UK and Europe. But actually, on a more positive side, I think we face the linguistic challenge. I think is a very big one in Asia. Particularly when whether it's in my case in China or the many languages of China, many languages of India and other locations. And it is really important, Simon. You talked about the translation in the appropriate context. Yeah. That's a tough thing to do, Jack, I mean, you work in many countries and how does an organisation like Vertiv make sure that you don't overlook first-class men and women engineers just because they don't speak English or just because they don't speak another principal language of the company?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's an issue that most multinationals face, regardless where you're headquartered, is whether you're a French company or a Swiss company or Swedish but there's a lot of English-speaking corporations in the Fortune 1000, and you do run into that problem of this is a fantastic individual, whether it's a technician or a data center operator or whatever, and their first language is not English. Yes. And they speak arguably passable English to get the job done, but their job day to day is not going to be done in English. And we need to get past that as organizations. We need to look at the skill sets, we need to look at what it is that they're going to be doing and how they're going to be doing it, and the cultural fit. So you bring up a very good point. I've been party of that myself. I've attempted to recruit and bring people around, and when you're doing the WebEx or the webinar, and you're like, okay, and then that of course then you get the Godzilla delay, so their mouth is moving and you don't hear the voice for a little bit. It's even worse. But when you work through that and then you meet them face to face, those barriers kind of go away. So we need to look past that. I think you bring up a very valid point. We need to get past the English is the language, and what language you need to speak, and what are you doing, and can you do it well? If you can do it well, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Now, I've got a few more questions that I'd like to come back to, but I thought we might just turn to the Q&A. And Jeff, what do we have there? Do you have any?
We actually do have a question from the audience, Oliver. One of the attendees is asking if any of you have any experience with university partnerships, and if this has been an effective way to bring talent into your businesses.
Well, Simon, you touched on that earlier. Can you expand on that? I think it's a great question.
Yeah, so we took the plunge a couple of times. So my engineering department went down to one of the local universities in Brisbane, where we're headquartered, and talked through with some of the professors and staff there what we thought we were looking for. And then they were kind enough, what I think anybody will find is that the universities are very ready for this and have very mature mechanisms to communicate it within their community and so on. And so we went through essentially an interview program and picked a couple of interns, one on the electrical engineering side, one on the mechanical engineering side, and they've progressed magnificently from intern to graduate engineer to engineer on roll, and they're now out there sort of commissioning small data hall expansions single-handedly in the space of about 3 years. So that's been excellent. We repeated that on our connectivity network operations side team, and again, really good result. So you've just got to be open to it. Yeah. And then, what I would say is then figure out how to make sure that your organization is also genuinely open to it, and these individuals have got a place and a path to roll into. It doesn't have to be super thought out, but genuine responsibility, because smart young people will get stuff done if you give them the chance.
Absolutely. Either of you two?
Yeah. So I was very fortunate a year ago, almost right now. But not quite PTC, it was like right around this time though. I was in Croatia. We were sending through our second wave of college recruits throughout the EMEA region. So we've put in place with different academic facilities throughout Europe and the Middle East, bringing in some new men and women, and it was very invigorating. And from our perspective, much like Infrastructure Masons, we've been attempting to ensure that we bring more women into the mix than we have in the past. Because historically, you don't see a lot of women in the engineering area, especially in the power and thermal side. But we've been fortunate to find some coming out of the software side, but we've been able to bring that in. And I'm really excited because that was our second wave. We're going to our third wave this year. And most of the ones I've met, they're still in the organization. They're solving problems in different ways. You bring up that youth and enthusiasm, and it's like, okay, I never would have thought of that. So it's great to start seeing that. But again, we have to, as an industry, be proactive. We've got to get out into the academic arena, whether it's universities or colleges or trade schools. We need to be working with all of them and putting programs in place.
No, I think those are good points, very good points on there. I mean, Chris, what about STT? Global Data Centers.
We've done it in the engineering side of the house with our critical infrastructure team, where it's more of like a year-long program structured to have. It was in the instance that we've done is this is relatively new for us, so it's within the past 6 months that we initiated this program in Singapore, and it was on the electrical side, and so it's a structured year-long internship. We've also done a lot that we've been doing for, I guess, 3 years now, more spread across the business, but it gets into, we had some IT kind of coding that was helping out with some programs. It's like a 6 to 8 week kind of shorter internship to fit into the Polytech program that they were in. We did some data scientist program that came in, and which was great because they crunched some things on the marketing side, which helped my specific team. But and finance has brought in some that also helped them when we were starting and transitioning to a new ERP system. That they kind of pitched in on doing some of the heavy lifting, at least for the short term. But the critical aspect to those is that you have something to do that is of value and gives them the opportunity. And if you look at it from the student's perspective, if they're still in uni, then it gives them a project and it gives them a view into, say, a particular work culture, which is in a value of themselves. And then for us, I'm not, maybe giving them the most strategic project to go figure out a new country that we're going or something like that, but we're giving them real work that impacts the business, and it's not just offloading, filing. I don't, we don't need that. We don't need extra people walking around to do filing anyway. So, but to give them something of substance. So it's worked out well.
I think there's some terrific examples there. In my own case, we set up a collaboration with a local university in China, and one of the insights in China is that I've gained is that the way in which government and the commercial sector is intertwined makes you think often, because I have a very prescribed view, having grown up in Western Europe, and a certain approach to the public and private sector. But the interrelationship between the large commercial organizations and government makes you think a little bit differently. So for example, we've formed an alliance with the Tianjin Vocational Institute. This is a medium-sized university, 17,000 students or thereabouts, but most importantly with a 2,000 student telecoms and big data program. And so they were a natural party to go and have a conversation with. And what was very interesting there were 2 points. One, when I first went and met with the principal, he showed me around some of the faculties they'd set up with the automotive industry in the region. So Lincoln Cars and the Ford Motor Company had both got an educational faculty where they'd gone to the university and said, look, we need to be able to hire great young people to come and work for us. And they had said, this is how we train other people in the rest of the world. And the government had said, okay, so if we build the faculty and equip it for you, will you bring the know-how? Because we want to have our students go through this. And the Lincoln and the Ford environments were showrooms and maintenance bays that were precisely how a franchisee from one of those motor companies would operate. So what we're thinking about there is that we've said, well, what we want to have is a data center faculty that we'd be keen to do on a non, if you like, corporate basis. We'd like to do it on an Infrastructure Masons, or it might be us working with Alibaba or with Tencent, to be able to create an environment which has a real mock-up data center environment that the government will help fund, that we will help create jobs, and this virtuous circle really starts to weave together. So that was very inspirational on that front, and I think there's a lot that we'll see of that type of move in markets like China. The other one, Jack, you talked about the male-female kind of mix, and Dean Nelson, I think, whom you all know, one of the founder of Infrastructure Masons. Dean and I had an opportunity to go to this university, and while we were traveling down in the car, one of the features I'd seen in China is that there's a great deal more gender balance in China than in many other markets. And I said, look, you'll see just the difference in the audience when you get there. But we were completely blown away that it was out of a 550 student audience. Firstly, 550 very bright pairs of sparkling, excited eyes, wanting to learn, virtually all of them speaking English, which was very impressive. 70% women as well. And that really kind of took both of us back, which was terrific to see, inspirational to see. And I think the linkages with universities is a particularly important one. But it sounds like we've got that well covered.
I think there's another aspect that you've not touched on yet, which is essentially kind of a resource war. So one of the things we've got to be very careful of, and we've all been guilty of it, whether it's someone who's been brought up and trained and then moved on to one of your customers' organizations, or vice versa, from a technical supplier of yours and moved inside for interest. So I don't know that anyone's sort of grasping for resources in that sense, but if you're not careful, you put pressure on the market, and costs go up, and it becomes hard. At the end of the day, if the scarce resources are hard. So again, it's the same strategic imperative. We've just actually got to get together under some banner, and the Infrastructure Masons is a really great idea to drive that in and make that interesting for young people to want to get into.
I think that's a key point, and I think we've seen that with some of the discussions we've held in the US in regions or with particular cities, that if you like, co-opetition, as they sometimes called it from my vague academic days, I think on that front, once you have your location, of course, people are going to buy on a whole host of different things, but it's very rare that any of us would find ourselves in absolute direct competition, because you might in local markets. And therefore, I agree with you totally, Simon. I think having a means whereby we can inspire the academic sector to work with the industry as a whole is a great way of doing that.
So if I want to just build on that topic for a second, so whether it's Sydney or Brisbane or Singapore, Tianjin, Shanghai, Hong Kong, large population centers. Mm-hmm. So one of the issues that we see in North America, and we're starting to see this now as we look at some of the rest of the world deployments, is someone wants to move into Thailand. A large population in the country, but in any one place you want to go build a decent sized data center, there may be two people that can spell data center, much less know how to build one and operate it. And I'm sorry, I'm being facetious when I say spell, because wrong. But where are you going to get the trades? When you look into, especially U.S., okay, Iowa, look at all the people who are building out in Iowa, or you pick the region. When people first went to Quincy,
yes,
no one even knew what a data center was, right? So yeah, we are creating kind of an arms race, or a people race. When you go to these fringe markets, it's very difficult, and then you start having this bidding war for personnel. So as an industry, we need to be careful as we think down the road and we start to go out to those markets. How are we going to build and support those markets?
Is there maybe time for one more question? Is there anything else that's coming, Jeff?
Not another question from the audience, but I had one to kind of build on that. There's good examples, and some of you have cited some of specific companies partnering with local universities that are local to a facility, whether it's Facebook in Luleå or Microsoft in Quincy, or these. And I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to work more cooperatively as an industry to help create a broader, more broadly recognized, say, digital infrastructure engineering degree program, which almost none of these have. But if we, work together to create, such a thing, I wonder if you think that would be helpful, particularly throughout Asia and your markets.
I can from a Singapore perspective, there's definitely been. I'm part of a group, SG Tech, sit on the data center board there, and they are working with the NUS in Singapore, specifically about that, setting up a certification first, but then a degree program for data center in terms of the engineering program, which is Singapore being the hub that it is I think something that you'd find a lot of interest within the universities. And I've heard of those inklings in other markets, but it is something that there's very few anyways that I'm aware of that are like data center degree programs or specific to data center. There's obviously a lot of engineering in general that are applicable to our space, but not degrees specific to our unique, the unique aspects of data center industry itself.
And it's not maybe surprising that, because I think it is a multidisciplinary, integrated engineering kind of challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, one of the examples I've always enjoyed is what the submarine cable industry did with suboptic, at least what was the original idea of suboptic, right? Yeah. And so it's transformed somewhat, but as far as I'm aware, they still get people to show up, and there's 50 to 100 white papers written, whether it's by junior engineers deep within ASN or from universities and so on. Now that's a very specific topic, especially the optical engineering piece. But there's work done on analyzing survey data. Yes. There's a whole bunch of things, and one of the things when I hear let's go down the route, which it's a great question, but then I worry, do we then start creating people to do things what we think is the right way? And going back to the point you made earlier about people thinking differently and so on. What I think is not well understood, and certainly we find in the majority of our supply chain, especially when you move into the maintenance part, is people don't understand what critical infrastructure is. And the difference between showing up in 15 minutes versus showing up in a couple of days, or laying that cable absolutely straight and labeling it at both ends, so it doesn't matter what is critical infrastructure. And if there's one thing that I'd say, well, let's focus on this first, because there's lots of great engineering being done on making diesel more efficient, or what's the transition, cooling, power supply, all that stuff. Bringing it on together under the banner of critical infrastructure and designing it and managing it is probably something that I think would be a bigger banner than just data centers.
And I think we as leaders in the industry need to be communicating that to the academic heads, because there's a certain degree of teach our people to do this, or solve the problem that we're heading towards, because that's where academics can be terrific in terms of understanding the best way to structure training and development programs, but also very importantly just making sure that we don't think too narrowly and just do tomorrow what we used to do yesterday. Exactly. Jack, any comments on that one?
I think you guys have pretty much nailed that one. That was good.
Okay. So I think we're coming up to the end of the session that we've got at the present time, and so one thing I'd like just from each of you on this is that, firstly, a big thanks on behalf of Infrastructure Masons for giving us your time and your thought. There's been great ideas that are coming out on there that we'll work on, I'm sure. But Infrastructure Masons has put a toe in the water in Asia Pacific, and I think it's very important in building global expertise that we don't become parochial and be just North American or just American. And I think there are challenges in going into new markets of stretching and replicating other things that are being done out there. What guidance would you give to Infrastructure Masons as an organization? Could it add value? Can it add to the opportunity to deliver success in the Asia Pacific region, perhaps around the resourcing, for example? Simon, I've been looking at you through that question. That's all right. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think one of the things the Infrastructure Masons probably need to think very hard about is who do you talk to next, and who do you build? I don't know what you call them, the groups or city clubs or whatever around, and look for more folks. And again, and that's why I kind of broaden the remit a little bit towards critical infrastructure rather than just data centers, because it's going to be hard to find, for want of a better phrase, homegrown local experts and leaders that would want to join in. And frankly speaking, if you end up with a bunch of us trailing around Asia, it's not going to be anywhere near as successful as it could and should be. So making intros, we've all got lots of contacts across Asia Pacific, and getting to that kind of more local out rather than expert in methodology is probably something that will help you grow and succeed, and I'll be happy to help with that.
I think it's good guidance, and appreciate your thought on that. Jack?
Yeah, so I'll echo the help. Glad to help. Well, we supported the effort you and Dean when you went over to Beijing. Absolutely. And we put a couple people in over there. That was great to get together, especially a lot of government people were involved. And so getting Infrastructure Masons plugged into that government, public-private thought process that does go on in China very, very well.
Yeah.
I thought that was great, and we're glad to support that. I want to echo your comment. I know it's infrastructure masons focus on data centers, but there are people in the generator area, the utility infrastructure area, as well as well, maybe it's the hospitals or healthcare side, or airports is another mission critical area. So maybe we grab some expertise when we're going into these markets so we can get some critical mass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you go into,
yeah,
if we go into Sydney and you know, it's you and 2 other people in Sydney. So it's like, you know, there's really, you all know each other already. So we need to get a little bit more critical mass so that we can add some value into the marketplace. And I think that'll work well.
Good.
So count me in as a volunteer to help do that, but I won't be flying to all of them. Thank you.
Goodbye. And Chris, final word on that subject to you.
I think again, one of the things I've learned is to be patient, you know, and find because it will take, because each market is unique. It's not a broad brush approach. But there are existing groups in a lot of them, and so I think there's a role to play for infrastructure masons to come in and they can be unique and help kind of find the niche that within each of the markets, because there are some groups in place, I would say, in most of the markets, but they, you know, I think the strength that you have that's unique is that you've got the global view, and it's embedded, and you've got a great history already of several years of operations, and kind of expanding that and that educational perspective, but then partnering with local other agencies, whether it's government or non-governmental, but part of the industry, and make yourself part of it is great. And as the other two, I'm happy to help participate where and when I can.
So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I think thank you everybody in the audience that's been listening on this, and of course will listen hopefully in the recording that has been made. I think there's been some terrific points that have been made. I think we're in great health here in Asia Pacific. We're certainly doing some interesting ideas and innovative means of dealing with the resourcing challenge. And to my mind, it sounds as though, well, it reinforces my own deeply held view that we've got a terrific future, which is what we're talking about here at PTC in Hawaii. So I'd like to say thank you to Simon Cooper from NextDC. Thank you to Jack Pouchet from Vertiv, and thank you to Chris Street from STT Global Data Centers. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. We'll close out now. Thank you.